All right, a brief introduction to Shakespeare's Macbeth. Just kind of going from the assumption that you haven't read the play or you haven't seen the play. Fantastic if you have, but I'm assuming nothing. Shakespeare, particularly if you're new to Shakespeare, it can be a little bit difficult. Yes, it's English, but of course, Shakespearean English is very different than contemporary modern American English and dialect, and so it can be a challenge. I think particularly if you're just sitting and reading it silently, it's one of these things that like I was saying in an earlier lecture, Shakespeare is much better experienced on the stage in front of you, where the actors and their expressions and their gestures and their intonations can often tell you exactly what you need to know, even if you're not exactly following what the words are saying. But the language is so rich and beautiful and poetic. And what I always recommend to students who are particularly kind of watching a Shakespeare play for the first time is just to kind of let the language just kind of wash over you and not try to kind of zero in on a sentence or a couple of words and pause and kind of wonder what that means. But rather just kind of let it flow and let kind of the action on the stage and the presence and the gestures and expressions of the actors and actresses kind of guide you in how to kind of interpret the play. So like I said, I'm going to send around a production of Macbeth that was done at the Globe Theater just a few years ago, and it's an incredible production, and in more or less kind of the same kind of space that the original Macbeth would have been performed, and it's phenomenal. And so I hope that works. But if not, we'll just have to settle with kind of reading the play. So I want to say a few things about the play. It was first performed in 1606, so just about 10 years before Shakespeare died. He was been in his early 40s. And it's this play that has a lot of rich storied history about it. In fact, in acting communities, you're not even supposed to say the name of the play. You call it the Scottish play, because there's this kind of wonderful apocryphal legends that the play is cursed, and people involved with it have died horrible deaths, and that the witches in the play are actually casting a spell on the performers and on the audience. And so it's got this wonderful kind of afterlife about it, and it is a dark, mysterious, violent play. So here's a plot summary. Let me just read this. A brave Scottish general named Macbeth receives a prophecy from a trio of witches that one day he will become king of Scotland. Consumed by ambition and spurred to action by his wife, Macbeth murders King Duncan and takes the Scottish throne for himself. He is then racked with guilt and paranoia. Forced to commit more and more murders to protect himself from enmity and suspicion, he soon becomes a tyrannical ruler. The bloodbath and consequent civil war swiftly take Macbeth and his wife, Lady Macbeth, into the realms of madness and death. So it is a play about greed, it's about ambition and the corruption of power, and the power of ambition to simply to drive someone into a complete madness and down a path of kind of horrible actions that just force them to kind of do one horrible thing on top of another just to try to keep the ship barely afloat. So some questions here or comments. So it's a deeply dark psychological tragedy which explores the effects of ambition and greed on the human spirit and the arbitrary use of power. What happens when someone simply exercises power for the sake of exercising power? And this is a timeless message, right? Human beings in all of our corruptness and brokenness, often we seek at our weakest points kind of our own status for its own sake. And so it's a play about kind of the seduction of power. I mean, this is in this play, it's kind of a Game of Thrones, so to speak. But I think Shakespeare's deeply interested in what makes human beings tick and what happens when we give ourselves over to lust for power, from the smallest thing to the largest thing. So yes, it's the so-called cursed play. There are superstitions that even saying the name of the play inside the theater invites actual tragedy and disaster. It's referred by actors as the Scottish play. Actors, by and large, tend to be a fairly superstitious community. And again, this idea that the spells that the witches speak in the very opening scene, this kind of suggestion that it's not just words on a script. This is actual kind of incantations, so to speak. So here's our main cast. Duncan is the ruling king of Scotland. Malcolm is Duncan's elder son, Donald being Duncan's younger son, and then our main character is Macbeth. And when the play begins, he is a loyal, successful general in the army of Duncan, and he's originally what's called a thane, kind of a subordinate, a kind of he's in charge of kind of a smaller kingdom, but he bends the knee to Duncan, and it's ultimately the ultimate kingship of Scotland is what he's after. Lady Macbeth is soon kind of thrown into the fray once she realizes this prophecy that Macbeth is supposed to become king of Scotland. She can't let it go. And she pushes her husband more and more to kind of do the deeds that he needs to do so that he can take the kingship, which of course would make her queen. Then there's Banquo, Macbeth's friend, Macduff, the Thane of Fife, and kind of a rival ruler, Lady Macduff, Macduff's wife. Lots of other Scottish thanes here that you can see listed there. There's Seward, the general of the English forces, a very small role, and then the three witches, who kind of anchor the metaphysical, mysterious, eerie aspects of the play. So I just want to walk through just kind of the kind of the main issues, the main kind of plot points in each of the three acts. And so when you read the play and when you watch the play, you'll kind of have a good sense of kind of what's happening and what's about to happen. So scene one, in the middle of a storm, three witches decide that they will meet with Macbeth, the Thane, wealthy nobleman of Glawus, or I think this supposed to be Glamis. Scene two, a wounded sergeant reports to King Duncan of Scotland that Macbeth and Banquo, who are generals, have just defeated the armies of Norway and Ireland, and Macbeth in particular singled out for a kind of heroism and praise. Scene three, the three witches approach Macbeth and Banquo and prophesy to Macbeth that he will be king hereafter. Banquo asks about his future, and he receives a kind of riddling response from the witches. Ross arrives and announces a new title for Macbeth, which confirms in part the witches' prophecy. And so Macbeth already starts to see this, it's not just strange witchery, it's already starting to come true. And he starts to kind of plot within his mind how he might become king. Later scenes, King Duncan welcomes and praises Macbeth and Banquo and declares that he will spend the night at Macbeth's castle in Inverness. He also names his son Malcolm as his heir. Macbeth sends a message ahead to his wife, Lady Macbeth, telling her about the witches' prophecies. Lady Macbeth suffers none of her husband's uncertainty and wishes him to murder Duncan. She leaps right into it and kind of pushes him to act violently, to take what she sees as his birthright to some degree, in order to obtain the kingship. When Macbeth arrives at Inverness, she overrides all her husband's objections by challenging his manhood and successfully persuades him to kill the king that very night. So Macbeth himself is very much on the fence. He's pricked by this prophecy, and he wonders at it, but he doesn't want to make a move, and this is where his wife again pushes him into it. He and Lady Macbeth plan to get Duncan's two chamberlains drunk so that they will black out, and the next morning they will blame the chamberlains for the murder. They will be defenseless, as they will remember nothing. Dastardly. Act 2. While Duncan is asleep, Macbeth stabs him. Despite his doubts and a number of supernatural portents, including a hallucination of a bloody dagger, he is so shaken that Lady Macbeth has to take charge. In accordance with her plan, she frames Duncan's sleeping servants for the murder by placing bloody daggers on them. Early the next morning, Lennox, a Scottish nobleman, and Macduff, the loyal Thane of Fife, arrive. A porter opens the gate, and Macbeth leads them to the king's chamber, where Macduff discovers Duncan's bloody body. Macbeth murders the guards to prevent them from professing their innocence, but claims he did so in a fit of anger over their misdeeds. So he's already having murders to cover up murders. Duncan's sons Malcolm and Donalbain flee to England and Ireland respectively, fearing that whoever killed Duncan desires their demise as well. The rightful heir's flight makes them suspects, and Macbeth assumes the throne as the new king of Scotland, as a kinsman of the dead king. Banquo reveals this to the audience, and while skeptical of the new King Macbeth, he remembers the witch's prophecy about how his own descendants would inherit the throne, and this makes him very suspicious of Macbeth. Right? So that should be enough to kind of keep you, get you into the play, into the kind of the action and the overall kind of arching themes here. So give the play a read, take the quiz, and then watch this wonderful production, and I do not think you'll be disappointed.